I'm divorcing you and remarrying Sarah.
The decisive words came out of Robert's mouth, and I felt a wave of heat from anger rising all the way to my ears. I had already felt for a while that our marriage was broken. But I still can't understand why he chose someone like my sister, Sarah, over me. Even so, my mind was made up. I didn't want to be a family with Robert any longer. Fine. In return, I'll be asking for a generous amount of alimony.
Take as much as you want, as long as I can divorce you.
Robert didn't care about the alimony. All he could think about was divorcing me and marrying Sarah. I threw the divorce papers I had prepared in advance at him. Fill this out and submit it, and don't you dare back out at the last minute.
Who says we should start over?
Eagerly, Robert began filling out the divorce papers. I never wanted to have anything to do with him again. I truly hated Robert. My name is Olivia. I'm 48 years old, and I work at an international consulting firm. I don't know many women my age who are thriving in the consulting field like I am. I've always enjoyed working. I like the feeling of earning more the harder I work. As the years have gone by, I've been given more and more responsibilities, but I've never had any complaints when it comes to my job. That being said, I've recently run into some issues at home. Actually, this might be more than just some issues. The truth is, my husband, Robert, is cheating on me. How do I know Robert is cheating on me? It's because our 16-year-old son, David, witnessed it. Robert is 50 years old, 2 years older than me. He works at a construction company. We met through a matchmaker, and it's been 21 years since we got married. I thought that while we may not have had a passionate romance, we quietly nurtured our love. But after hearing from David, I realized that the time I thought I had spent happily with Robert was all a lie. I'm going to tell you what happened after David discovered Robert's affair. Our only son, David, is 16 years old and now a high school student. He's more mature than most kids his age, and even helps out around the house. When I come home late from work, he'll even make simple meals for us. I'm proud of how capable he is. My husband Robert usually comes home around the same time as I do, or even later. Especially during busy seasons, Robert often works late, and by the time he gets home, both David and I are already asleep. That was how our family life was, and until recently, I thought we were just an ordinary family. It all started one Friday evening near the end of the year when I had just come home from work and was making dinner.
Mom, did Dad mention having plans today?
It was rare for David to ask about Robert. I wondered if he had something he wanted to ask his dad. Today, he said he had a company year-end party tonight. I told David what Robert had mentioned this morning.
Really?
David didn't look convinced.
A year-end party. Do people usually have company parties with just one other woman?
What? What does he mean? A woman? David started talking again, as if to clear my thoughts.
Well, on my way home from school today, I stopped by my friend's house. He didn't come to school today, and I had some things to drop off for him. His place is pretty far, about an hour from school, and it's near Dad's office. After I left his house, I was walking down a quiet street, and I saw Dad holding hands with a woman, and that woman was Sarah.
What? I couldn't believe my ears. Robert was with Sarah after work? My sister Sarah is 35, 13 years younger than me. She's supposed to be working part-time at a restaurant, and it's not near Robert's office. If she went all the way there, she must have gone specifically to see him.
I've been thinking for a while that Dad's been acting suspicious. I wasn't sure if he really loves you. If he's cheating with Sarah, a lot of things make sense.
David, with his sharp insight, was suspecting that Robert and Sarah were having an affair. Now that he mentioned it, he might be right. Since we got married, Robert has never once whispered sweet words to me. After 20 years of marriage, I figured it was normal, but maybe our relationship had been distant all along. I had never compared us to other couples, so I never thought much of it. So, you've been thinking that way. I didn't notice a thing.
Well, Mom, you can be a little slow. But if Dad's really betraying you, I'll always be on your side.
David's kind words made my chest tighten. Ever since I heard about Robert's affair from David, I couldn't stop thinking about it. That night, Robert came home drunk around midnight. David had long since gone to bed. I decided to take a chance and ask Robert, who was flushed from drinking. "Hey, was it really your company party tonight?"
What are you talking about? I told you about the party this morning.
Robert answered with a scowl, realizing I had caught on to something. "Right. Actually, David saw you walking hand in hand with Sarah today." As soon as I mentioned Sarah's name, Robert's face instantly tensed up. That reaction confirmed my suspicions. I pressed him further. "Sarah's workplace is pretty far from your office, right? So it wasn't just a coincidence that you ran into her after work. And holding hands? That's not something that happens by chance, is it?" When I pressed him, Robert froze for a moment, then let out a boozy sigh and said,
And that makes you think I'm cheating? You're really going to believe a story with no proof? Maybe David just got it wrong. He's at a sensitive age, after all. He probably misunderstood. Instead of worrying about this nonsense, why don't you go to bed?
Robert was determined to play dumb. I sighed and, giving up for now, went to the bedroom. But I was sure of it. Robert was definitely having an affair with Sarah. At that moment, I felt a deep certainty. Sarah called my phone the next night. Robert wasn't home yet, and David was studying in his room. It didn't seem like a coincidence that Sarah would call me so soon after what happened yesterday. Sarah isn't the type to reach out to me often. Being 13 years younger, she was spoiled by our parents growing up. She's the complete opposite of me, with her carefree attitude, while I'm more responsible and high-strung. Even in appearance, we're nothing alike. I take after our mom, and Sarah takes after our dad. Sarah is much prettier, and there was a time when I envied her looks. When she was little, we used to play together, but by the time she was in middle school, I had already moved out of our parents' house, and we didn't spend much time together anymore. And now, after all this time, she's calling me. I took a deep breath and answered the phone. "Hello."
Hi, Olivia. It's been a while.
Hearing Sarah's cheerful voice after so long brought a wave of nostalgia over me. "This is a surprise. You don't usually call me. What's going on?" I got straight to the point, curious as to why she was reaching out. In the back of my mind, I couldn't stop thinking about what David had told me yesterday.
Well, I figured you might have already guessed, but I thought it was time to reveal the truth.
There was a teasing tone in her voice that made my heart race with unease. "Reveal the truth? What are you talking about?" I pretended to be clueless, urging her to continue.
Didn't Robert mention that you had figured it out yesterday?
Hearing Robert's name made my head feel hot. What are you trying to say? Tired of Sarah's cryptic tone, I decided to cut to the chase.
Okay, don't be in such a rush. The thing is, Robert and I are seeing each other.
Sarah said this brightly, without a hint of shame, and I was filled with utter contempt for her.
Olivia, you're so clueless. We've been together for 18 years now, and you only figured it out because David saw us? You're so slow.
18 years? The number Sarah said left me speechless. That long ago? 18 years. That was before David was even born.
You didn't know, right? Robert used to laugh and say, Olivia is so clueless, she'll never figure it out. She's too busy with her work and doesn't care about me. And just like he said, you didn't notice until today. Poor thing, he's always said I'm cuter than Olivia, you know?
Sarah's mocking voice echoed through the phone. She'd always had a habit of bragging about being prettier than me. It must have been this arrogance that made her think she could get away with having an affair with my husband. I was hit by this devastating truth and couldn't find the words to respond.
Olivia, it's so sad that you've been cheated on right after you got married. Not that it's any of my business.
Her grating laughter was like a black cloud smothering my heart. Being cheated on by Robert with my own sister, and now having Sarah call to mock me about it. It was a crushing blow to my pride.
I think Robert will want to talk to you soon. We've had enough of this secrecy, so we decided to come clean. Besides, we don't want any detectives snooping around.
With that, Sarah abruptly hung up the phone. What is she thinking? It wasn't just that she was having an affair with Robert. She went out of her way to call and rub it in my face. I couldn't comprehend Sarah's nerve. But this was only the beginning. I would continue to have my pride shattered even more by both Sarah and Robert. After Sarah's call, the way I looked at Robert was completely cold. I wondered if Sarah had told him that she had confessed their affair to me. Either way, I absolutely didn't want to talk about Sarah and Robert's relationship. I couldn't love Robert anymore, so all I could do was wake up in the morning, wait for him to leave for work, and hope he'd come home as late as possible. I told David clearly about Robert's affair with Sarah. That's the situation, so your dad and I might separate someday. If that happens, who would you stay with? I wanted to respect David's opinion, since he had the right to choose.
Of course, I'd stay with you. I don't want to live with a traitor like him.
David quickly cut Robert out, and I secretly felt relieved by his answer. I was still trying to figure out when to bring up the topic of divorce. After Sarah had told me about the affair over the phone, she started sending me what felt like harassment messages. She had barely cared about me before, but now, acting bold, she constantly sent texts.
Tomorrow, Robert and I are going to the aquarium for a date. You probably haven't been in years, right? I'll bring you a souvenir.
I was shocked as I read her message. Why on earth would she tell me about her date with Robert? The absurdity of Sarah's actions made me sick to my stomach. And imagining a 50-year-old man flirting with Sarah at the aquarium made me feel even worse. Please don't tell me things like that. I angrily sent a reply.
Are you jealous? Jealous women are so unattractive.
Sarah replied with another unnecessary comment, so I quickly closed my phone. What is wrong with her? She's having an affair with my husband, and now she's sending me details about their dates. She's completely insane. I sighed, wondering how long this would continue. Just as I expected, Sarah's strange harassment didn't stop.
We went to a hotel yesterday.
Most of her messages were about their dates, but some were even more explicit, like that one. Disgusted, I decided to block her number. I felt relieved, thinking the messages would stop, but then she started calling me instead. And it was right in the middle of my workday. I ignored it. But no matter how many times I ignored her, the calls kept coming. Not wanting to disturb my colleagues with the constant ringing, I left my desk and stepped out of my office. "Hello, what do you want?"
Oh, finally, you answered. Geez, ignoring me like that is so mean.
While I was busy working, Sarah, who only worked part-time whenever it suited her, spoke in a carefree tone. I felt a surge of anger but kept my voice steady, urging her to get to the point.
Well, I'm pregnant with Robert's baby.
"What?" Her cheerful, excited voice rang in my ears, and I wondered if I'd heard her wrong.
You don't believe me? I'll send you the ultrasound picture.
Sarah even went as far as sending me an ultrasound picture via text. It was clear from the photo that she was indeed pregnant. "Is this real?" I asked with a trembling voice.
Of course. If you don't believe me, just ask Robert.
Nausea suddenly hit me, and I gagged right there.
Oh my, are you okay? Was that a shock?
Completely oblivious to my feelings, Sarah continued with her insensitive remarks. I felt like I was going to lose my mind and told her, "It's not shock, it's disgust. Why are you even telling me this?"
Because it's fun to see how you react.
Hearing nothing but Sarah's twisted responses, my head began to spin. Sarah was certainly more attractive than me, and as the younger sister who knew how to charm people, she was often called cute by those around her. However, I knew she harbored some jealousy toward me because I had always been serious, did well in school, and had a successful career. Sarah, on the other hand, was terrible at studying and had a history of bad behavior at school, with my mom frequently being called to the principal's office because of her. I realized that at this moment, she was directing all the resentment she'd built up toward me over the years. "Anyway, don't ever call me about things like this again." I hung up before she could respond and immediately blocked her number. I had to get through this somehow. After hanging up the phone, I realized my breathing had become incredibly ragged. The fact that Sarah was pregnant with Robert's child had hit me harder than I expected. What's more, this news solidified my decision. I could no longer stay with Robert. For the next week, I couldn't find any peace at home. David, worried about me, took over the household chores. His kindness was the only thing keeping me grounded. Robert barely showed his face around me. We were essentially living separate lives under the same roof. I reached my breaking point one Saturday afternoon when, unusually, Robert was home, and I finally decided to confront him directly. "Hey, I need to talk to you." I was surprised at how cold my own voice sounded.
What is it?
Robert, lying on the couch staring at his phone, tilted his head back to look at me. Seeing my serious expression, he finally sat up and said,
"I'm divorcing you and remarrying Sarah."
The decisive words came out of Robert's mouth, and I felt a wave of heat from anger rising all the way to my ears. I had already felt for a while that our marriage was broken, but I couldn't understand why he'd choose Sarah over me. Even so, my mind was made up. I didn't want to be a family with Robert any longer. Fine. In return, I'll be asking for a generous amount of alimony.
Take as much as you want, as long as I can divorce you.
Robert didn't care about the alimony. All he could think about was divorcing me and marrying Sarah. I threw the divorce papers I had prepared in advance at him. Fill this out and submit it, and don't you dare back out at the last minute.
Who says we should start over?
Eagerly, Robert began filling out the divorce papers. I never wanted to have anything to do with him again. I truly hated Robert. Once he finished scribbling on the papers, he carelessly handed them to me.
It's a hassle, so you go submit it.
He spat the words at me. I took them, irritated. I'm taking David with me. You're fine with that, right?
Yeah, do whatever you want. I don't care about him.
Robert had never been involved in raising David, and David never really saw him as a father either. So it wasn't surprising that Robert didn't care about his son.
Well, I'm marrying Sarah, so get those papers submitted soon.
With that, Robert left the house with nothing but the clothes on his back. He was clearly planning to move in with Sarah right away. I could imagine Sarah's house already stocked with Robert's clothes and everything he needed, which only made my anger boil even more.
Mom, are you okay?
David, who I thought was studying in his room, came out to the living room to check on me. Yeah, I'm fine, but your dad and I are getting a divorce. I hesitated as I told David about the divorce. Even though he's in high school, the news of his parents' divorce would surely be hard to take. My heart ached, wanting more than anything to protect David's life and well-being.
I see.
David nodded calmly, his voice steady. I was surprised at how unaffected he seemed by the news of the divorce.
After all, I was the one who told you about Dad's affair. I'll always protect you, Mom.
His reassuring words brought tears to my eyes. In that moment, I knew that even though I would be raising him as a single parent, I would do everything I could to ensure David never felt deprived. Right after that, I filed our divorce papers. By the start of the week, the divorce would be official. The next day, Sunday, David and I were planning to go out together when my phone rang. I found the unknown number suspicious, but thinking it might be important, I decided to answer the call.
Hello, Olivia? Stop blocking my calls. I had to use a payphone for the first time because of you.
The familiar voice on the other end left me speechless. I never expected Sarah to go so far as to use a payphone just to call me. What do you want? Now that I was divorced from Robert, there should be no reason for her to contact me. Eager to end the conversation, I asked coldly.
Don't be in such a rush. Thanks for divorcing Robert. Oh, you're not officially divorced yet, are you? Well, either way, once the divorce is finalized, I'll be marrying him right away, so thanks. Also, we're having the wedding next month, so you definitely have to come, Olivia. If you don't show up, I might have to do something bad to David. Anyway, I'll send you the details later.
She said it all in a relaxed tone before hanging up. A wedding? What is she talking about? I couldn't wrap my head around Sarah's logic anymore. Who invites their spouse's ex-wife to their wedding? Frustrated, I immediately called my mom. She didn't know yet that I had divorced Robert or that Sarah was planning to marry him. I had hesitated to discuss such adult issues like affairs and divorces with her. But when my mom heard the story, she was furious with both Robert and Sarah.
I can't believe she's marrying her sister's husband after having an affair.
She expressed the outrage I had been feeling. I also told her that Sarah wanted to invite me to her wedding. My mom couldn't comprehend Sarah's outrageous behavior either. "Mom, there's something I need your help with." I shared a plan with my mom to get back at Sarah and make her regret crossing me. She immediately agreed, and I felt a wave of relief. "Just wait, Sarah. You'll regret making me angry." A month passed, and the day of Sarah and Robert's wedding finally arrived. A formal invitation had indeed arrived, and I learned the wedding would be a small family-only affair. At first, I planned to leave David at home, but he insisted on going, so I decided to bring him along.
Oh, Olivia, thank you for coming to witness my happiness.
Sarah, dressed in her wedding gown, greeted me with a sarcastic tone.
What? Why is Olivia here? And David too.
Seeing us, Robert visibly panicked. It was clear that inviting me had been Sarah's idea.
Hey, why did you invite them?
Because I wanted to see Olivia get upset.
Sarah responded without a hint of shame.
What?
Robert's face twisted in frustration. I thought they might start arguing, but just then, one of the staff called them, and the wedding began. At the chapel, the bride is supposed to walk down the aisle with her father, but Sarah's father wasn't there.
Is the bride's father here?
The staff frantically searched for him, but of course, he was nowhere to be found. That was no surprise.
My daughter's wedding after an affair? I'm not attending that.
My dad had refused to come. As for Robert's family, they weren't there either, for the same reason. So the only relatives present were from my side of the family. With no dad to walk her down the aisle, Sarah had to enter alone. Sarah's face was strained, as she had planned to walk down the aisle with our dad, but now she had to do it alone. It was supposed to be her wedding day, but it had surely turned into a terrible memory for her. Even during Sarah and Robert's vows, their kiss, and their exit, none of us guests clapped. Not a single person offered any applause. Sarah left the chapel looking like she was on the verge of tears. Yes, this was my plan. I had my mom explain the situation to our relatives to make sure Sarah couldn't have her perfect wedding. Some might think it was a petty act of revenge, but in reality, Sarah was the one who stole my husband and my happiness. This was her rightful punishment.
And now, we'll move on to the reception.
Even the staff seemed to notice something was off, but they tried to keep things together and directed us to the reception hall. Once the reception began, no one approached the couple's table, and no one took photos. Sarah, realizing that the wedding she had imagined was crumbling, broke down in tears just before she could read her letter to our parents.
What's happening? Why is everyone ignoring me? This was supposed to be a happy wedding.
Her sobs echoed through the venue over the microphone. The staff looked helpless, unsure of what to do. Robert stood there, pale and speechless, not knowing how to respond. Feeling that it might be time to end this mess, I stood up and walked over to Sarah. "I'm sorry. I'm the one who told everyone to ignore you today. I figured after you spent 18 years stealing my happiness, you could handle a little bit of payback on your big day." I said it with as much sarcasm as I could muster, and Sarah flinched.
How could you? Olivia, Do you enjoy making people miserable? I can't believe you. Give me back my wedding.
As always, Sarah only cared about herself, shouting at me. Robert stood there, staring in shock at the scene. It seemed that even after 18 years of having their affair, he had no idea just how awful Sarah's true nature was.
Who's really making people miserable here?
At that moment, I heard David's voice from behind, and everyone turned to look at him. David stood up and came to my side, glaring at Robert and Sarah in turn.
Who's the one who took Dad away and made my mom sad? Wasn't it you? Wasn't it both of you? So why are you acting like the victims?
But
Sarah faltered, unable to respond to David's blunt truth. The room filled with murmurs.
Come on, think about it. What you did was the worst thing you could do to someone. You're the ones making people miserable. And Dad, I've never thought of you as a good father. You were cheating the whole time.
David's straightforward words left Robert speechless as well. For a moment, neither of them could respond, but Sarah wasn't the type to just give up. She wiped away her earlier tears and, now defiant, glared at both me and David with her reddened eyes.
you two are a crazy pair. Seriously, it's ridiculous that you didn't even realize there was an affair going on. Olivia, you've always been so dumb. I knew I couldn't beat you in school, but to be so clueless about this, how oblivious can you be?
Laughing hysterically, Sarah seemed to have lost control of her emotions. I hadn't expected her to go this far, and I exchanged glances with David. He gave me a serious nod, signaling me to go ahead. Since you've said so much, do you think it's okay if I reveal that little secret?
What secret? Don't say random things.
Sarah snorted. She didn't seem to have the slightest awareness of what we were talking about. It was clear that I needed to spell it out for her directly. Who do you think the father of that baby is?
What?
What are you talking about?
Both Sarah and Robert looked shocked and confused. Oh, you didn't know? Sarah had another lover besides you.
What do you mean?
Robert's eyes widened in disbelief. I clenched my fists. Exactly what it sounds like. David told me. He saw Sarah going into a hotel with another man, not Robert. And when I checked the date on the ultrasound Sarah showed me, the timing lined up perfectly with that guy. I'm sorry. Would you have preferred not to know? Yes, I had heard from David earlier that he saw Sarah entering a hotel with another man. That's why I had a feeling that even if Robert and Sarah got married, things wouldn't go well for them. Both Robert and Sarah, the one caught in the affair, stood there with their mouths wide open in shock.
That's a ridiculous accusation. Olivia, you're just bitter because I'm happy, and now you're trying to get back at me. It's pathetic. How can you accuse me of cheating without any proof?
Sarah, clearly on the defensive, tried to fight back, but both David and I shook our heads. I do have proof. Look. I showed Sarah the photo of her entering a hotel, arm in arm with a man who wasn't Robert. David had taken the picture to catch her in the act. He really is an incredible son.
What the hell is this?
Well, it's not what it looks like.
Sarah's denial trailed off. But with the evidence in front of him, Robert couldn't deny it any longer.
You were planning to marry me, and you were messing around with this scumbag?
But I couldn't help it. He was too pushy.
What did you just say?
At that point, Robert and Sarah's argument spiraled out of control, and it was clear the reception couldn't go on. I thought the situation had gotten out of hand and that the staff at the venue were being dragged into it, so I shouted with all my might. "Both of you are completely out of line. First of all, Robert, you're the one at fault for cheating on me with Sarah. And Sarah, it wasn't enough for you to have an affair, but you kept contacting me and harassing me. What was that about? I don't want to see either of you again. Our parents have also decided to cut ties with you both. I'll be demanding a hefty amount of alimony, so be prepared for that." With that, I left the venue with David and my relatives. I no longer considered those two as family. I promised myself that David and I would live a happy life, far away from them. After that, Robert and Sarah were disowned by their families and left without anywhere to go. Of course, I demanded hundreds of thousands of dollars in alimony from both of them. Despite being grown adults, neither had enough savings to pay the alimony in full since they had been spending on each other. Now they were stuck living with the burden of paying off their debt. Later, Robert decided to take a DNA test to determine whether Sarah's baby was his. As expected, the child wasn't his. Realizing Sarah had betrayed him, Robert broke up with her. Sarah, abandoned by Robert, moved in with the other man who fathered her child, but he had no intention of raising a family and quickly left her. In the end, both Robert and Sarah ended up alone, and Sarah became a single mother. Although the child wasn't at fault, it was only fitting that Sarah got what she deserved. Sarah is still pleading with our mom, asking for money and help with raising her child, but my mom completely ignores her. Having given up, Sarah is now struggling to pay off her debts and raise her child, having placed the child in daycare and taken on a full-time jobs. If she'd been that busy from the start, she wouldn't have had time to have an affair with Robert, I think with a sense of detachment. When Robert told his company about his divorce from Sarah, he was shunned by his colleagues, to the point where he couldn't stand it anymore and resigned. I have no idea how he plans to pay off his debts from here on out. I don't feel any sympathy for him though. I want him to suffer just as much as Sarah. Now that I'm free from the mess of their affair, I feel lighter, as if a weight has been lifted from my shoulders, and I'm able to focus on my work with a clear mind. I owe all of this to David, who has always been by my side, supporting me. There's not much time left before he becomes an adult. I'm proud to be his mom, and I'm determined to raise him into a good man.